Hello, my name is Robert Stack, and welcome to Movies from the Unknown. There's plenty of head-scratching movies that Disney has been associated with over the years, but perhaps none as memorably sincere, genuine, and off-putting as Bubble Boy. It was referred to by the Washington Post as the meanest-spirited film ever associated with Disney. Released less than a month before 9/11, the film rehashes the timeless tale of a boy in a plastic bubble, risking life and limb on a cross-country journey to stop his true love from marrying the wrong man. It's a mix of Homer's Odyssey, Pee Wee Herman, and late 90s comedies, both high and low. It's more fever dream than cinema, and yet has the rewatchability of Lebowski or the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because the human brain can simply not comprehend it in one viewing. Perhaps thousands of years from now, human evolution will allow us to comprehend and fully appreciate the gloriously beautiful Rorschach film. But until that time, we will just ask the men who made it. Co-writer Cinco Paul, who penned the script with Ken Dario.
So Ken and I had written our first script together, and a script called Special, and it had sort of caused a bit of a buzz in town and ended up at MGM, I think. And as a result of people reading and really responding to that script, we had a bunch of meetings with producers, and we had a meeting with a producer named Beau Flynn, who's now does all of the Rock's movies. So now he does like huge, big, action movies. But at that point, he was doing like Requiem for a Dream and, much smaller movies. But we met with him, and I think he pitched us 3 ideas. And the third one, he said, what do you think of a comedy version of Boy in the Plastic Bubble, but it's a road trip movie? And I remember Ken and I on the drive home saying, that's the one. We just loved that idea so much. We thought it was such a great idea. So the idea really originated with Beau. And so then we immediately, told Beau we want to do this. And so we went out and pitched it all over town and ended up at Disney. It didn't make sense. I mean, I will say that the movie that got made is much more pushed to the envelope than our pitch was, and our original script was too. The original movie was more family friendly and probably would have been less confusing to you and your brother as kids. So it turned into something a little more, shocking or envelope pushing than it originally was intended. And we had always envisioned it as a Pee-wee's Big Adventure sort of comedy, right? And so here's what happened. So we sell the pitch to Disney, and then we've kind of, we've had an outline sort of / treatment that we'd come up with. And so we have a meeting with the execs, and the execs there at the time at Touchstone, Todd Garner was running things, and a producer named Mark Baradian was right below him, and Mark is the one who would really champion us to Todd. So we have this meeting to basically launch us to write the script with Todd and Mark. And Todd says, love it. We're so excited. Does he have to be in a bubble? I mean, literally, it's like the Hollywood cliche of you just bought Bubble Boy. How can you say, does he have to be in the bubble? And what Todd meant by that was, does he have to be in the bubble the whole movie? By the end of the first act, can we get him out of the bubble? No actor's going to want to be in a bubble for the whole movie. No one's going to want to watch a boy in a bubble suit for the whole movie. And we said, the first act is he's in his room, and then the whole second act is he's in the bubble. That's the story. That's the movie. And he said, and what what is it if he's out of the bubble? It's not Bubble Boy anymore. What? And he said, well, maybe he wraps himself in saran wrap, and he's trying experiences like eating spicy food and things. And we were just, it was just one of those meetings where your heart just sinks. And so we said, look, he really needs to stay in the bubble, but, you're the boss. So what about if halfway through we get him out of the bubble? And he said, okay, well, we'll try that. So we write the draft, and halfway through he's out of the bubble. And that's why we had the ice cream man, because he needed a frozen truck to stay in since he was out of the bubble. That's like where that originally came from. And so we thought this was the total wrong direction to go. But, this was our first big script, pitch sale and everything. So we went along with it. So anyway, we turn in the script. In spite of the fact that he's out of the bubble halfway through, they really respond to it. They like it. But Bo tells us that Disney wants to put another writer on it, which as you can imagine, happens all the time. And certainly to first-time writers like us. We were devastated, but they hired a guy named Michael Kolesnikow to do a rewrite on the script. And one thing they had realized from reading the script was that, he should stay in the bubble suit the whole time until the end. Sometimes people just have to see it or read it to realize it was a bad note. And I think this is when they read the script, they realized, oh yeah, maybe he should be in the bubble the whole time. Because really, you've seen the movie, everything's building to him voluntarily choosing to leave the bubble suit. That's his arc, right? That's when he really changes and decides he's going to take a chance and take a risk and not live in regret, And so I think they realized that when they read the script, and they realized they'd made the wrong choice there. So basically they told Kolesnikow, okay, I don't know what notes they gave him specifically, because obviously I wasn't in the room and they weren't communicating everything to us. But basically they said, well, he should stay in the bubble. They went back to our original treatment, really, and then had Kolesnikow do it. And so then Kolesnikow had edgier stuff that he put in it. I will say what his biggest contribution, which remained, was that we had just a group of random people on a bus, and he turned it into a cult, the Bright and Shiny cult. So that was his big contribution. So basically, he then rewrote the script, and then it got greenlit. And then, to his credit, Bo brought us back. And so he brought us back onto the project. And so we were there when we were during the casting process, and we were there through all of production. And I can tell you plenty of stories about that. But that's basically the process of how the script got written, right? It was us, then Kolesnikow, and then Bo brought us back. And a lot of our process was restoring things of ours that had been changed, that we felt that we missed, but then also sort of transforming it into a new thing in some ways.
Director Blair Hayes.
So I came to the attention of Jerry Bruckheimer. And as you probably know, Jerry really likes to, pull from, he came from advertising, and he likes to, pull directors from the leagues of, good commercial directors, including Michael Bay. And so anyway, what happened was Jerry put together a list that was supposed to be an internal document of the 12 directors that I want to be working with, and I was on that list. Well, somehow that list got out to agencies, Hollywood agencies. I ultimately went with William Morrison, and I started just getting stacks and stacks and stacks of scripts. And I was like rejecting all of them. And like my new agents are thinking I'm insane. And finally, this one, like we were talking about before, this one called Bubble Boy comes across, and I'm like, now this I can do. It makes sense from a Pee-wee's Big Adventure type of idea. So, and that's it. And so I said, yeah, let's get that. And went in and had the meeting with the folks at Touchstone at Disney, and went well. I didn't screw that up. So they said, let's do it. One of the first things I asked when I got into this meeting, and it's with like Nancy Jacobson and and very, the heads of production, the heads of, creative and everything at Disney. And I said to them, I said, now, they were like, well, what do you like about this? I said, it's irreverent and it's whack and it's dark in parts of it, and it's really pushing it. And I said specifically, is the line going to remain in the script and make it to the screen about the one that says, it's the Jews, Morton, they're going to want more than $100,000, think, man, think. Which Swoosie Kurtz delivered, in total 100% perfection. And they looked at me and said, yeah, it's one of my favorite lines. I said, great, because so if that line doesn't push a few buttons. So, they were acknowledging, at least the people in that room at that time, were acknowledging, and I needed to hear it, because otherwise, if it was going to get watered down, I didn't want to do it.
Co-writer Cinco Paul.
So here's what happened. So they brought on Blair Hayes, and he was very passionate and excited. And then he also was very supportive of restoring a lot of the stuff that had been lost. So then we're on the set, and we're making the movie, and it is literally a dream come true. Because this is actually, the second script Ken and I have written together, and now it's getting made into a movie, and here we are on the set. And the first 2 or 3 weeks are just a dream, because it's all the stuff before he goes on his journey, right? And we've got Swoosie Kurtz and John Carroll Lynch, right, playing the parents. I mean, they were just phenomenal. And Jake is great. And Marley, who was Bo Flynn's girlfriend at the time, is really sweet and great playing Chloe. And also, they're sticking to the script, really, word for word. And so, and this, the design of the house and the look of it was really cool, and we were so excited. And then I'd say about 3 or 4 weeks in, we show up on the set and there are new pages. And we're like, who wrote these pages? Where did this come from? And it turned out it was Blair had started rewriting the script. And there's, basically, there's a point in production when it's just a train and it can't be stopped, and he's the director. And so he then at that point started rewriting the script himself and, changing things. And in that process, we felt a lot of what we wanted the script to be was being lost and being changed. And, we were losing just a lot of the thematic stuff about what it means to be in a bubble and everybody having their own bubble that holds them back. And it just sort of devolved into kind of zaniness, and then a lot of crude humor that we didn't really like and didn't felt tonally with what we were doing, because we were shooting for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is a movie that you can watch with everybody, but is also really smart and has a dark edge to it, So that's what we were aiming for. Jake really eliminated a lot of Jimmy's dialogue because he felt he could play it with his face and with his eyes and didn't need so much dialogue. So that was a little frustrating to us initially, because we wrote all this dialogue and we want Jimmy to say these things and it'll be fun. But I think in a lot of ways, Jake was right, because I think his performance is really charming as Jimmy. And I think he did a really good job. And so I think his instincts were right there for sure. It just sort of devolved into stuff stopped making sense. I mean, one thing that I'll just give an example, the Vern Troyer stuff as Dr. Freak. There's a whole thing where he goes, I'm not Minnie, which is a reference to Austin Powers, which we just hated. It felt like a cheap joke, and it felt like it was out, sort of breaking the fourth wall in a bad way, referencing another character he played, stuff like that. So then at some point, it just got out of hand, and we had no, we're the writers, we're not the directors, so we didn't have any control or any power. We were pretty disenchanted, and we were bummed by what had happened. But I will say that then once they got to the end, it was pretty much back to the script. And a lot of it, like the stuff with where I think it's basically after Jimmy meets Slim, once they go to Vegas together, that was where it really started to diverge from what we've written in the script. Although there was, obviously there's a lot of it still there, but that's where most of the changes were made. And then the ending was pretty much as we'd written it. And so there you go.
Vern Troyer was banging on Bubble Boy's bubble the first time he sees him. Vern Troyer being, the guy who had the freak show. I just thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if he said, like, I'm not Minnie, I'm not Minnie, I'm not Minnie, because everybody knew him as, Mini Me. Cinco and Ken were still on the set on that day, and I remember Cinco being not really happy about that. And, my feeling was like, if it's not working, we'll just cut it out. But it seemed to get laughs, in the previews, so we, kept it in. Things change when you're making a movie, for all sorts of reasons, financial, artist input, both actors and directors, and you start to see it play out literally before your eyes, and then on the screen, and you're going, okay, this is different, and it's not always like this is way better. Sometimes it's just different. Like I didn't know it was going to feel this way, and over the course of any movie, you're going to see changes for all those reasons. Plus, money-wise, if you get too many weather days or you lose a location or whatever, you have to kind of drop back and, punt. And that happened to us a couple of times. But the script, I wouldn't have done the project if the script hadn't been fantastic. And I literally, laughed out loud, and this is all to Cinco and Ken's credit. I had a terrific experience on the movie, but as it progressed, or digressed, I don't know which one, but as it went along, things would come up, and we also did a certain amount of improvisation. I've always been big on improv. We only had like a week of rehearsals, so it was like as if we had none. When one's open to improv, then you can also start to change the tonality of a show to a degree. So as we were going along, though, like I was done before, like the $500, that was all improvised. It was Jake and me both had this idea because we were already going for it, with the town full of nothing but Chinese men and a mud pit, which was in the script. It was an hysterical idea. However, racist it is, but we were there, and since Peng Wu, the guy playing the MC, who's totally American and talks like you or I, he, I said, you got, if you don't mind, you got to do this, and with an accent, and let's just go with it. We're gonna dig this far. Let's just jump in the shit pit, along with Bubble Boy. So anyway, we're doing it, and he's, we just thought it'd be funny for Bubble Boy, the first time he's meeting somebody who doesn't speak like him, who speaks with a heavy accent, to start to mimic him. And that was part of it, because, that's what his whole life, he's just been mimicking people, that he hears on TV, or his mother or his father or people he comes in contact with. So this whole idea of like, you want $500? And Jake just went with it. Goes, yeah, I would like $500. It's $500? And then you can see the light bulb go off in his head. He's so great, Jake. And finally goes, yes, I want $500 and $500. And that became the two of them just screaming. Because Peng Wu, the guy, he's a great comedian, great comedic actor, and he and Jake just went for it. So it was a great scene. And
I saw the sign outside, and it said that you have $500, and so.
You want $500?
Yes, I would like $500.
You want $500?
Yes, I would like $500.
You want $500?
Yes, I want $500.
That line was completely improv in the moment, as was John Carlin. So let me tell you one interesting anecdote, if I can. When I was first meeting him in casting, and he came in, and I just have to ask, there are no lines in this movie for the character of Jimmy's dad. What makes you want to play this role? And he said, that's exactly why I want to play it. And he said, not only that, but when he finally speaks, it's really profound, one line. So anyway, he loved it for that. Then a couple of days before we're going to shoot the scene in the movie where, they've caught up with Jimmy in the movie, and he's out. He's called for them. Mom, Dad, I give up. Come get me. And his mom turns to her husband and says, "Okay, go put him in the car. I gotta go. I gotta go pee." And so then we cut to a scene where there's Jimmy in the back seat, still in his bubble, and his dad in the front seat. I think the line in the movie is just like, you're doing okay, or, just checking in with him. But John, a couple of days before we were going to shoot the scene, he said, "Hey, Blair, I want to pitch out something to you for that scene." I said, "Okay, what?" He said, what if in that scene, I looked up out the windshield, and I looked up at the sky, and there's a full moon, even though it's daylight, on those kind of days. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "And what if I said something like, hey, look, you can see the moon today. You ever stop to think, what if Neil Armstrong went all the way up there, but never walked on the moon?" I'm like, whoa, yeah, yes, that's a great idea. So we shot it that way, and I love it. That's a great, getting back to heartfelt and not mean-spirited. It doesn't get any better. But John wrote that line. It was fantastic, and one of my favorite parts of the movie.
How was it out there? Was it fun? You could see the moon today. It kind of makes you wonder, what would have happened if Neil Armstrong had gone all the way to the moon and then never stepped on the surface?
So little things like that can happen, and I think that's really the movie, just like all movies, it just bubbled along, no pun intended. What happened was, so again, it was a PG-13 from day one. Although during prep, I started getting notions of, the studio's idea for this film might be slightly different from mine. The part where I knew that the shit might hit the fan was when I got a call from the head of marketing to say, "What would you think if we made it a G-rated movie?" And of course, I'm like, then I'm hanging up and calling my agents and saying, I will pull my name off this picture if they do that. And at the time, it might have meant something because the movie hadn't come out yet. But I said, absolutely not. No, I can't. I called the other producer, Bo Flynn, who was, the guy who brought this, whole thing together, whose idea it was and everything else. And I said, they can't do this. You don't make this for the kids. It will never work. It'll just straddle the fence, between a movie that coulda and a movie that, like, what the F is this? Don't make this into a kid's movie, please. And so, we said no. We came back and they said, all right, fine, we'll make it PG-13. But they wanted to, water down a lot of parts of it, and they did. I will say they replaced the editor. I got a call to come in to talk to the heads, the same people that I talked to when I said, are you going to keep the line? It's the Jews more, and they're going to want a lot more than $100,000. Same people sat me down and said, we want to get another editor to take a pass at it. And, and I didn't react well, but, and they got their way in that. I said, well, I want Pam, who was the editor, who I'd worked with and who's fantastic, to at least be able to continue on and argue for reasons why things were the way they were, and or not, and again, and they find themselves, okay, that's fine. And they tried to sell it to me, saying like, well, we're going to hire this guy, and I don't remember his name right now, but he was this older guy who they said, an editor who they had hired many times before to do tune-ups or whatever the hell you want it, however you want to describe it. So I pretty much had to say yes. And at first, I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I want to do this. And then, my managers and agents and stuff said, hey, you just got to, bite the bullet and just go along with it. So, I did. And I had to say yes if I wanted to have any kind of continuing career. But I still screwed it up anyway. And, at the end of the day, I don't think there was that many changes. There was no grandiose changes that, I would remember if I felt like, oh man, you just, ruined, you emaciated this movie. And of course they had to think the Directors Guild makes it so you'd have to get my permission to change the rating, the agreed upon rating. So, and I said, there's absolutely no way. There's no way. If I had been hired to do a G movie, I would have done a G movie or a PG movie. I did a PG-13 movie.
This rarely happens, but Bo brought us back into the editing process because they were having issues. And they were having issues because a lot of stuff wasn't making sense because it had, in my opinion, and I'm sure like Blair has a very different take on this, and I get that. But I'm just going to speak from my and Ken's experience, is that a lot of stuff didn't make sense because it had diverged too much from the script. So Bo brought us in and said, like, here's a cut. What do we do? How do we fix this? And he said, we have some money for reshoots, but not a lot. It's like the Freaks stuff, like that made no sense at all. There was a lot of stuff in Vegas. There was just stuff it was kind of a mess in the middle. And so he was bringing us back on, like, what can we do to help? So we were, which is very rare for writers, I think, brought into the editing room to help with the cut. And then we sort of did some rewrites for the reshoots to try to help make the Dr. Freak and the Freak scenes make sense. And, but there was just a lot of stuff to try to fix. And so we sort of tried to do our best.
Right before it came out, it was shot, it was in the can and everything else. And then the mother of the real Bubble Boy, the guy who the horrible John Travolta movie was based on, his mother caught wind that somebody had done this movie called Bubble Boy. And, she started, raising, some fuss about it and got her lawyer involved. And unfortunately, what happened was, when this mother of the real, Bubble Boy, who had since passed away, came on, saying like, how dare they make a movie about, my son and all that. And I had to go on the Today Show and defend the movie. And they didn't tell me, Matt Lauer, nobody told me that I was going to be on the air with her, the woman, the mother of the Bubble Boy, and sitting next to her lawyer. So, I'm on the Today Show. Yeah, I'm on the Today Show. Matt Lauer is nailing me, man.
Oh, yes. No, I saw that. And Ken and I, our hearts sank because, like, Blair was clearly not prepared for that. It was sort of a gotcha thing. And then it's just like I think Blair and Bo were on there together, and they just didn't look good because they were like the Hollywood types, making fun of this poor Texas woman's dead son,
And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying not to smile or smirk, because what I'm thinking is, and this is spoiler alert if anybody's listening to this and you don't want to hear it, just fast forward by 60 seconds. The spoiler alert that I couldn't say it on the Today Show and spoil it, but the spoiler alert is he doesn't have the disease. He was born with it. He got over it. His mother was overly protective, so she just carried on this whole ruse that he was still, infected with the disease. So, and I wanted to tell her that, but obviously, again, I couldn't reveal that to the audience at the time. And I wanted her, she hadn't seen the movie. And I asked her, or I think Matt Lauer asked her, are you going to see it? She said, oh my God, no. So here I am thinking like, well, well, there you go. If you're not even going to look at the movie, but you're already going to summarily slam it. And it worked. They got to Michael Eisner, and next thing I know, they're pulling all the advertising from it. They'd already had commercials on the air and stuff, and trailers, and they're pulling all billboards. They're pulling it all because they're listening to to this. They don't want to offend somebody. And so, and again, I know we're trying to address, was it mean-spirited? First of all, of course, it's not mean-spirited. It is a push-your-buttons type of movie, intentionally so.
And so, yeah, that ended up being bad. In some ways, like, there's no such thing as bad PR, though. So in some ways the controversy could have helped, but it was problematic because it was Touchstone, which is part of Disney, and the trailer really made it look like this family comedy. So then we had our big premiere, and it was pretty exciting and this is the thing, we didn't know this because we were so new, But at the premiere, everybody's laughing at everything because, half the people in the audience were working on the movie, so they really wanted to succeed. So it played like gangbusters at the premiere, and we're super excited. And then reality hit when the movie came out, and it totally bombed. And because it just, like, what was it? I mean, you said you and your brother were confused. It's like, what was this movie? Because it was really sold in the trailer, if you see the trailer, as kind of a family-friendly comedy, and it was not that at all.
And then, they made the trailer, which I think is like one of the worst trailers I've ever seen. Be honest with you, it was silly. It was not the tonality of the movie at all.
It's hard to show the world what you're made of when you're allergic to just about everything. I'm allergic to diapers, hands, scissors, grass, even my parents. And then I met Chloe. But she's about to marry the wrong man.
Mark, well, the wedding's this Saturday in Niagara Falls.
And I have to stop her. So now, I'm gonna go out into the world and win her back. And nothing is gonna stand in my way.
So it's like, the little things that, can happen, and, you can decide as a director, do you want to, when are you going to put your foot down, or when are you going to change your name and walk off, making an Alan Smithy movie, and I never got anywhere near that, but it was, it was a challenge, and, because that was going on. And I don't know why somebody thought that this suddenly could be turned into a movie for the kids, with the subject matter that it had. I just don't know where that logic came from, but it was there. Trust me. It was going to be a big, a much bigger release, and then it became a much smaller release. And but and it was, I'll tell you a sad story. The night of the first showings, my agent or my manager said, "Hey, why don't we do the traditional thing where I rent a limousine and we get Jake and anybody else you want to come with us, and we'll drive around from theater to theater and see how the audience is reacting." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds great." So we did that, and we started the evening at Mr. Chow's, and had a good time, had a couple drinks, and we got in a limousine and started going from theater to theater. The first theater was half full, the next one was like the same or less, and then the third one, by the time we hit the third or fourth one, it was like, we're not having a fun evening, so we all said goodbye. So, we kind of knew right then. It was like, and Jake and I both were like, "Oh, this is going to make $100 million. It's going to be big, funny comedy." And we got to see it firsthand, like, oh, I guess this is not the reception we were looking for.
And so I remember going to the theater with a real audience, and then seeing like families with little kids in the audience and thinking, oh no, what? These are not you should not be bringing your little kids to this movie. And so the movie was a failure. The critics hated it. I don't really blame them because it's very flawed and it's kind of a mess, but there's something there that I think is still, there's a lot of good stuff. There's funny stuff in there.
The fact that at least I got to release the movie, 85% of what I wanted it to be. And that, again, not to sound pretentious, but I think it was a little ahead of its time in terms of the comedic tone of it, because nowadays, God, man, movies, tonality and the things that you say and do, it's a lot harsher and edgier than that, a lot. So I actually think it was a little ahead of its time for American taste anyway.
But anyway, it totally bombed. And so I remember getting a call from Mark Varadian, producer at Disney, and saying, so we don't know what happened. Maybe it's a marketing failure, but he said, I just want you to know that everybody here at Disney was a huge fan of the script and that no one is blaming you for this. And then that really kind of turned out to be the case because Disney brought us on to write the Santa Claus 2 and a couple other scripts before that. And so our careers were able to survive this, actually. But I think Blair had a harder time. I think and Jake obviously was able to survive it too. But I think Blair had a hard time. I think a lot of the blame fell on him, whether that was right or not.
It's not like the picture was taken from me, but by any means. But it's not like I had Final Cut either. And it was my first experience, and it kind of soured me on it for a while. It took me, about 4 or 5 years to do another picture, and even that was a pilot, not a full-fledged, theatrical 2-hour movie.
On a $13 million budget, the film would gross only $5 million. Bubble Boy was dead and buried during its original release. But that didn't stop this phoenix from rising from the ashes.
At one point, Comedy Central or the Comedy Channel, whatever it was called at the point, bought it and was just running it constantly because they were desperate, I guess, to fill space. And then it found a bit of an audience. I would not say Bubble Boy is a cult classic. I'd say it's a mini cult classic or something. It definitely has found its fans and its audience. I'm still surprised. Every once in a while, someone will come up to me and the thing I've written that they're most excited about is Bubble Boy. And I'm like, really? But they are out there.
So, it was sad at the time, but in retrospect, I'm actually much happier that the movie finally found its audience.
I'd always really loved musicals, and I'd always sort of had an intention of making movie musicals or doing something like that. And so I was reading through the Writers Guild Basic Agreement and found this section on separation of rights, which said that if you have written a movie and they don't do a stage production of it within 5 or 6 years, the rights revert back to you. And I thought, we've got the rights to Bubble Boy.
Stars above. The Sumerians had the story of Gilgamesh. The Greeks had one about their war with Troy. But we, lucky we, blessed we, have the ending known as Bubble Boy.
We can turn it into a musical. It just my daughter was getting more into musical theater, and so I just had that on the brain. And so I thought, I wonder if Bubble Boy would make a good musical. And then I started to go through it, and I turned back, not the movie, but our original script. And I went back to the original script and started spotting where the songs would go. And I'd say Slim is going to have a song about regret. Of course, it's perfect. Push Pop, he's going to have a song called It's an Elk, and there was a song for the Freaks, and the Bright and Shinies will have a song, and it just it felt so clearly that it almost was good. It was going to be so much better as a musical, and it has a character who's larger than life, who's got a big heart and a big want. He wants Chloe. He just loves her so much. He's willing to do anything for her. And that is something that works like gangbusters in a musical. A musical really needs that. And so suddenly it felt like, this is really going to work. And so I just went through, and my first mistake was I did stick too much to our script. And ultimately the Freaks had to be cut. So the Freaks got cut out of the show, and Pippi and Pappy were also in the show, and which was always one of my favorite parts. I remember when Ken and I first wrote the Pippi stuff, and Jimmy, waking up and realizing that Pippi was driving the car and was dead. That was a very fun moment for us, just writing that scene together. But all that, I just realized that's too much. I was just trying to put too much and be too faithful to the script. So cut out the Freaks, cut out Pippi and Pappy, and realize, okay, so it's basically, there should be 3 adventures, right? It's the Colt, and it's Slim, and then it's Push Pop. And that's basically the story. Well, I mean, our first production of Bubble Boy was with high school kids. And because I was co-coaching the improv team at the high school, and they had all these amazingly talented kids who were great at musical theater. So we just put it on with them, and my daughter was Chloe, and we had an amazing cast, and we just did a little local production here. And so we did our production, and that went really well, and it showed to me, like, the audience really loved it and really responded to it. But of course, again, it's kind of a false audience because it's mostly people who know the kids who are in it, and so they want the kids to succeed. But so I then applied to this ASCAP musical theater workshop, which Stephen Schwartz runs, and Bubble Boy got chosen, and we presented like 15 minutes of the show with the high school kids, and it killed. I mean, and this is an audience of people who don't know the kids and don't know me, and it killed. And Stephen Schwartz fell in love with it, and he took it under his wing and then was doing everything he could to help get the show going. We got a production at Carnegie Mellon, and he's just been like amazingly helpful and pushing the show along. And so now, it's licensed, and high schools all over have done it. And Ken and I try to go to as many productions as we can. So we've been to Kentucky and Canada and New York and Texas, and we've been all over to visit these high school productions, which is always really fun. But then we also got a great cast recording, with Alice Ripley and Richard Kind and Matt Doyle and a lot of big Broadway stars, and that's really helped promote the show as well. And really, like, Ken and I felt this is a way to get Bubble Boy back, right? To tell the story that we'd intended to tell from the get-go, and really have that thematic unity of everybody has a bubble they need to burst out of, and sort of to get Bubble Boy back, to restore it to what we'd wanted it to be. And really, to me, the musical is the perfect version of Bubble Boy, is the best version of Bubble Boy. Now, it doesn't have stuff that I'm sure fans love, like the $500 thing, which was totally improvised, by the way, was not written, which I think is really funny and successful, but just didn't work or belong in the musical, My agent and I have been pushing, for years, trying to get a movie made, and we're still working on it, and it still may happen. But to me, it's definitely, the musical is the best version of Bubble Boy.
You can see the moon today. Today you can see the moon, and it kind of makes you wonder what if Neil Armstrong had gone all the way to the moon and never stepped on the surface. It kind of makes you wonder. You can see the moon today.